All over the news, you're hearing it. Israel's so-called failure in the recent attempts to take out Hamas leaders in Qatar. And at first glance, it seems almost stupid strategically. How could Israel even dare to bomb on Qatari soil, the land of the king hosts, the supposed neutral negotiators? It feels reckless, overly aggressive, completely uncalled for. The operation didn't succeed, and now the whole Middle East is up in arms against Israel. But here's what I know. Israel doesn't move without a plan. Nothing is random. Every step is weighed. Every variable is considered. So the real question isn't just did it work or not. The real question is what message was Israel sending, and how does this play out in the long run? Today we're going deep into exactly that. Why Israel was prepared to take the risk of striking Hamas terrorists on the soil of the very mediators, and what it tells us about the bigger strategy at play. Let's take a look at Qatar. On the surface, they play the role of the calm, collected negotiators, the ones hosting peace talks, always presenting themselves as the bridge between warring sides. But what they seem to be is not what they truly are. I need to say something straight out. Israel has taken on Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, the Houthis, terrorists in Iraq, and yes, Iran itself, thousands of miles away. But here's the truth nobody talks about. Qatar is the hidden front, the quiet battlefield shaping everything around us. And in our modern world, wars aren't just fought with tanks and missiles. They're fought in the media, in the classrooms, and on the streets of foreign capitals. And Qatar has mastered that battlefield. They're a tiny country with no real army to speak of, but they're sitting on mountains of cash. And they've used that wealth to buy influence, pouring billions into Western universities, think tanks, and media outlets. They've bankrolled protests, they've amplified slogans, and pushed narratives designed to demonize Israel, carefully packaging lies and propaganda until it looks like the truth. Now make no mistake, they're not neutral. They are the extremist propaganda machine wearing a diplomatic suit. And yes, they've been hosting negotiations since the very beginning. But here we are, almost 2 years later, and what's come of those negotiations? Nothing's come. So you have to ask, are these negotiations really about peace or about dragging things out, letting pressure build against Israel while buying Hamas more and more time? Now let's shift to the operation itself, because while the headlines say failure, what Israel pulled off was nothing short of groundbreaking. Picture this. Israeli intelligence pinpoints the Hamas leadership moving inside Qatar. Negotiations were supposed to be happening, deals were supposed to be in the works, and yet these terror chiefs were sitting comfortably plotting their next move against Israel. And Israel responds by strapping a ballistic missile onto a fighter jet, something no one thought could even be done, and delivering it with surgical precision straight into a building over 1,000 miles away. That's not just an attack, that is a message. We can reach you anywhere. Now think about the distance from Israel to Doha, Qatar, and then realize they hit their mark like a sniper's bullet. That is intelligence brilliance, combined with military innovation at a level that's shaking the entire Middle East. Every capital in the region is watching this and thinking, if Israel can do that to Qatar, what can't they do? So a big question rises, how will Qatar react? Now Qatar isn't going to roll out tanks or fighter jets. That's not their style. They don't really have the military muscle to challenge Israel head on in the battlefield. What they do have is a whole lot of money, a whole lot of media pressure, and influence. Now think about it. Qatar owns Al Jazeera. It pours billions into universities, into sports teams, and politics around the world. Their power is soft power, if there ever was soft power. It's shaping the conversation, it's pulling strings behind the scenes, and hosting talks they make look like they're the key mediator. Now we're already seeing the playbook. Doha is hosting an Arab Islamic gathering to rally backing after the strike, with the draft language condemning Israel and threatening political costs to Israel more heat than teeth. But it's heat nonetheless. And the UAE, who just normalized relationships with Israel, publicly signaled Gulf solidarity with Qatar even as it tries to keep channels to Jerusalem open. Now that is classic Qatar. Not tanks on a border, but networks, media, and leverage. Now let's break down this idea of a new Arab League that is forming through Qatar. What does that really mean? Here's some history. For decades, Israel faced a big Arab League boycott. It worked in 3 different layers. First, the primary boycott. Arab countries themselves refused to buy Israeli goods or do business with Israeli companies. Then came the second boycott. If a company in Europe or company in Asia worked with Israel, Arab states pressured them to stop or risk losing Arab markets. And finally, the tertiary boycott. Even companies that traded with those Israel-friendly companies could get blacklisted themselves. It was a huge economic wall, and for years, it really boxed Israel out. But by the 90s, after the Oslo peace process began, most of that started to crumble and fall apart. Gulf states stopped enforcing those wider boycotts, foreign companies came back, and the system slowly collapsed. And here's the key point. In today's world, economies are too global and interconnected to bring back that old model in full. We'll probably see statements, we'll see diplomatic protests, maybe even ambassadors recalled or some targeted economic moves, but not the kind of airtight boycott that Israel once lived under, that I and my friends grew up under. So where do the Abraham Accords fit into all of this story? Now they've definitely been under pressure, but they've also held up better than most people expected or anticipated. Let's take the UAE for an example. They've strongly criticized Israeli actions at times and even pulled back their diplomats for a while here and there, but trade between the two countries kept growing in any case. Bahrain, Morocco, they've been more cautious, sometimes stepping back a little or facing public pushback at home. And still, the relationship never collapsed or stopped. Here is the truth. Countries didn't sign the Abraham Accords because they suddenly fell in love with Israel. They did it for their interest, for trade, for energy, for shipping, for investment, for technology, and interests tend to stick, even when emotions run high. So even with the Qatar crisis, even with everything that's happened, what you're likely to see is a tough collective statements, but not a complete break in the relationship. Now, will the Arab states really team up with Iran over this attack? Well, the short answer is they'll talk like it, but they won't actually do it in practice. You have to remember, Saudi Arabia, Iran restored formal relations only in 2023. That was a deal brokered by China to calm things down in a very tense region. But make no mistake, Saudi Arabia still views Iran as the regional bully and villain, not a partner it wants to rely on in the future. That whole agreement was about lowering the heat and keeping space for Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, their big plan to modernize and diversify their economy. So yes, you'll hear strong rhetoric, but Gulf states will prefer to voice anger in Arab-only settings, not by locking arms with the Iranians. And this is where Israel still has a unique edge. We have technology, especially water tech. Israel today isn't the isolated country of the old boycott years, of the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. It's become a world leader in water solutions. We reuse almost 90% of our wastewater throughout the country, running some of the biggest desalination plants on Earth and exporting that know-how worldwide. Now, these are exactly the solutions Gulf states and Saudi Arabia in particular need as they look to secure food, water, and energy for the future. You don't just walk away from that kind of value. Life here in Israel hasn't just been about physical recovery. It's about people trying to rebuild from the ground up. So many hardworking Israelis, bakers, artisans, small shop owners had their lives turned upside down. Some were called to reserve duty, others had to leave their homes, many lost months of income almost overnight. And now they're trying to start again, to reopen their businesses, to restock shelves, to get back to doing what they love. But it's not easy, guys. They need help. And that's why Arta exists. Arta partners directly with these small businesses, buying their handmade goods and delivering them in beautiful boxes to homes around the world. Each box helps real families get back on their feet. It puts money in the hands of those working hard to recover with dignity, not charity. Now, if you want to be part of that effort, go to www.artsabox.com/TBNIL and use the code TBNIL to get 10% off your next subscription. Again, that's Artzabox, ARTZABOX.com/TBNIL. One box, one family, one step closer to rebuilding Israel. So here's the bottom line for this so-called New Arab League moment. Expect louder voices, stronger statements, and maybe even some symbolic economic gestures. But the same countries that are trying to build a modern Middle East with new ports, power grid, data networks, and water security, well, they aren't about to throw away years of progress and suddenly embrace the Iranians. Interests will keep them tethered, connected, even in the moments of anger. And one more thing before we move on. Israel isn't Iran. Israel isn't trying to export a revolution or run militias across the region. Israel is clear about one single goal in this war. Hamas has to go away. And that goal, and how Israel pursues it, is what keeps reshaping every diplomatic conversation in the Middle East. Make no mistake, guys, Gaza is a terror state, and Qatar has been the master of covering it up. For years, their media machine, especially Al Jazeera, has hammered one message into the world: Zionism equals genocide. It's a lie, but it's been repeated so often that it shaped global opinions. And if you look back, you can trace the timeline. In the 90s and early 2000s, it was subtle, framing Israel as the aggressor in every clash. By the time of the 2008 and 2014 Gaza wars, the narrative had hardened. Israel bombs, Palestinians suffer. And after October the 7th, the campaign went full throttle. Every image, every headline, carefully packaged to paint Israel as a villain and erase the fact that Hamas started this war with a civilian mass murder so brutal it shocked the entire world. Now, the truth is simple. Gaza is the biggest extremist pawn in modern history. It is built, armed, and fueled to try to bring Israel down, both from within its borders and in the eyes of the world. And the sickest, most twisted part is that the ordinary people of Gaza have been used and abused in this scheme. Human shields in a propaganda war they never chose. They've been held captive in a reality they can't break free from, no different from the oppressed and persecuted masses across extremist Islamic nations. So let's get real. Qatar has given Hamas leaders a home. Khaled Mashal and Musa Abu Marzouk have lived in Doha for years, and Khalil al-Khaya also found refuge there. Even Ismail Haniyeh, before his assassination in Tehran in 2024, was based out of Qatar. And while Gaza burns, they sip coffee in Qatar's hotels and plot the next war. So now that the picture is clear, Israel just ripped the mask off the Qataris. The strike in Qatar was a way of saying, we see the game and we're done playing it. Israel intends to neutralize Hamas in its own way, to go in, to take over, and actually free Gaza and its people from Hamas's tyranny. And here's another truth. Hamas leaders aren't only in Gaza and Qatar. They're living in luxury across this region, Europe included. And for Israel, there is no middle ground here. If you give shelter to terrorists, you're siding with them. Aligning with terrorism means you support it, and that's not just something Israel or the Jewish people will ever accept. So let's turn our attention to Europe. You've probably seen posts saying the Prince of Qatar owns more land than the King of England. I've seen multiple of them myself. And now, that's not 100% accurate. But let's be clear, Qatar's footprint in the UK is massive. We're talking about over 100 billion invested. They own Harrods, they own a massive complex called the Shard, they have a huge stake in Canary Wharf, luxury hotels, even part of Heathrow Airport. So whether or not they literally own more than the king, the point is their money is everywhere. And money means influence. What about the churches? In the past decades, around 3,500 churches have shut their doors across the UK. Many were bought up and turned into mosques. The symbolism here is powerful. Historic Christian landmarks repurposed. Entire communities watching their spiritual centers closed down and handed over to Islam. It is dramatic, it's raw, and it shows the depth of change across Europe's cultural landscape. Now here's the other side of that story. The tides are turning. Just last week in London, about 100,000, possibly even 150,000 people poured into the streets in a massive rally. The message was loud and it was clear. We are Britain, not Palestine. These weren't quiet protests. They were bold, they were angry, and they turned violent at times, with dozens of arrests and police officers injured. But what matters is really this. People are reaching their breaking point. They're sick of watching their streets, their culture, their homes bend under the weight of extremist corruption and violence. And they're starting to push back. Now, before we wrap up, here's another scenario to keep in mind. Talk of World War III isn't just background noise at this point. Across Europe, it's a real fear. Russia's already pushed into the Ukraine. It's tested Polish airspace with drones. And leaders are warning openly that Putin could even target a NATO country if he wasn't stopped. That possibility changes everything. Look at Germany, for instance. They recently signed a deal worth nearly 4 billion euros to buy Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense system, the biggest defense export in Israel's history. Now, this is all part of a wider European project to build a new shield in the skies. And here's the point. If the worst happens, if Russia pushes further or Iran keeps stoking chaos, Europe and the West won't just be watching Israel from the sidelines. They'll be standing in line for Israeli defense systems, Israeli technology, and Israeli know-how. Because when the enemies of the West grow too bold, Israel's reputation shifts. It's not just the small country fighting in the Middle East anymore. It becomes the arsenal and the shield that others truly need. That's a reality we're heading towards. So let's circle back to where we started this entire conversation. Qatar, the strike that so many headlines rushed to call a failure. Did Israel kill every Hamas leader it targeted? It absolutely didn't. Did the world react with outrage? It absolutely did. But here's the thing. Israel doesn't play for headlines. It plays the long game. Every move is calculated, every risk is weighed, even when the immediate results look messy. The deeper strategy is already in motion, and by striking in Doha, Israel wasn't just chasing men, it was sending a message to the entire region. We see you, we know where you hide them, and we're not afraid to act, even on the soil of your so-called mediators, the Qataris. The West may frame it as reckless, the Arab world may rage, but Israel is looking years into the future, to a Middle East without Hamas, to a region where terror groups have no safe harbor, and to a world where when the next global storm comes, Europe and the US line up not to lecture Israel, but to depend on it. And that is the bigger picture. That's a strategy behind the noise, and it's why what looks like failure today may prove down the line to have been the opening move of something much, much larger.